Hello, this is John Pearson, the Director of Technical Services for the Tennessee Concrete Association. And today we're going to be discussing Concrete in Practice number 2, Scaling of Concrete Surfaces. And assisting me with this will be Alan Sparkman, the Executive Director of TCA. And so we want to talk a little bit about scaling. And what is scaling? Scaling, it's a localized flaking of a finished hardened concrete surface. And most commonly, it's the result of freeze-thaw exposure. It typically starts in small patches, and then it often progresses where those patches merge together and they extend to expose larger areas. Scaling can either be light, moderate, or severe. Light scaling does not expose the coarse aggregate. Moderate scaling, somewhat deeper than light scaling, about 1/8 to 3/8 of an inch of mortar loss, and then severe scaling, there's much more surface loss. You actually are clearly exposing the coarse aggregate. And Alan is going to now talk to you a little bit about why concrete surfaces scale.
Thank you, John. So that's an important question. Why do surfaces scale? Because that can lead us to how we can prevent that problem. So one of the very most important things for exterior concrete especially is to use air entrained concrete. So in our part of the country, that air entrainment should be around 5 to 6% air in the fresh concrete, and that's absolutely critical. If we place concrete in any environment where it's likely to freeze without air entrainment, we are almost certain to get scaling. So using air entrained concrete, very important. Using concrete with adequate strength for the application. So for exterior concrete, ACI 332 tells us that's 4,000 PSI concrete. So driveways, sidewalks, patios, they should all be at least 4,000 PSI, and they should be at a reasonable slump, which ACI would define at 5 inches or less. You can exceed that using water reducers, which is fine, but that is critical to help prevent scaling. The other things that cause scaling are improper finishing. That's one of the biggest causes, especially when the scaling is due to delamination, which means that we started finishing the surface, trailing the surface too soon, and we trapped bleed water. That's 100% of finishing practice problem. So it's critical that we never touch surfaces with any tool while bleed water is present. The other thing is insufficient curing. That may not cause scaling, but it can certainly aggravate scaling. And then de-icing chemicals have to be mentioned. Even good quality concrete, particularly concrete that's less than a year old, that has de-icing chemicals applied, is highly likely to scale. So John's going to talk about some ways we can prevent scaling in our concrete surfaces.
Anytime a concrete's exposed to freezing, thawing temperatures, you always want to have that concrete air entrained. So use of a good quality air entrained concrete is paramount. And in severe conditions, the concrete strength really needs to be 4,000 PSI or higher. So even with the air entrainment, that higher strength helps resist those stresses that develop when the freeze-thaw cycles cause the water to expand and turn to ice. Do not use excessive water, and don't use jitterbugs, or especially with high slump concrete. Use of jitterbugs or even vibrating screeds can cause the coarse aggregate to be pushed down and cause that weakened surface layer at the top and do things to your air void system and that base layer. Like Alan said, properly cure the concrete. That's always paramount on any type of concrete, but it does help with the freeze-thaw, resist the freeze-thaw damage that can cause the scaling. And always consider the use, and it should be done all the time, but the use of a breathable sealer, especially when de-icers are going to be used. But the sealer will help keep water from penetrating as easily into the concrete, so therefore your concrete may not be critically saturated, and it can resist the freeze-thaw, and it can resist those de-icers penetrating in, causing even more havoc. So, and then if possible, don't use de-icers if you don't have to. Always use them sparingly if you do use them, and never use them in the first year or the first winter. The concrete's very susceptible to damage during that when it's very young and still has a lot of moisture inside it and has not developed all its strength yet. So always watch out for that. As far as repair of scaling, minor scaling it's a cosmetic issue, and you may not need to be repaired. So that's it's a possibility that repair will not be necessary. On the other extreme, concrete slabs with excessive and progressive scaling, repair might not even be feasible. But for light to moderately scaled surfaces, those can be repaired. But you have to always remember that the repaired surface is only going to be as strong as the base surface that it's bonded to. The surface should be prepared to remove all the unsound concrete. It needs to be cleaned of any contaminants that might cause that bond to be reduced, because if you don't have a good bond, you're still going to have problems down the road. You can prepare those surfaces using a hammer and chisel, sandblasting, high pressure washing, to obtain that clean, roughened surface. And then that roughened surface, it can be repaired using resurfacing, such as Portland cement concrete or latex or polymer modified concrete. So that's all we have on scaling for today. Please stay tuned for future CIPs where we'll discuss other topics.